Thank you very much. So, the Industrial Revolution and the society it gave rise to, the industrial society, are the biggest moments in human history, are the biggest achievements of humanity. And at the same time, they are some of the least appreciated events in human history. And I'm not talking only about the overt enemies of the industrial civilization, the people the group that Frank this morning very successfully characterized as the decivilization force. I'm talking about the average person out there. They take the industrial society for granted. They don't consider it as an achievement. They mostly consider it as a natural phenomenon. Like there was the era of the dinosaurs, then the Ice Age, and then mechanically somehow we also got the industrial society. And the very few people who bother to defend the industrial society and the industrial revolution, how do they do it? They mostly do it with graphs. You've seen it, right? The reverse hockey stick. They say we have all these metrics, life expectancy, wealth, GDP per capita, and throughout human history they're static, and then during the Industrial Revolution they go up like that. So their message is mostly that the industrial society gave us more stuff. And don't get me wrong, the stuff that we have more stuff is very important. But I think this defense of the industrial society is missing a lot. It is missing what an industrial civilization still means for me and for you and for each one of us. Because the industrial society is a once-in-a-lifetime qualitative change on how we live, not just quantitative. It's a qualitative change. Because it's the first time in human history where the human potential is liberated to such an extent. It's the first time in human history that the human mind is unleashed. And everything good, everything beautiful that we see around us is the result of human ingenuity, of some people's mind working in action. Now, throughout history, there were people who were geniuses. Throughout history, people were creative. But the difference is that it is only in an industrial society that these creative people can get the thumbs up, the green light, to say, yes, pursue your creative ability, pursue your creative passion. And it is only in an industrial society that we benefit from this creative genius of all these people. And usually they say, oh, you know, the industrial civilization is very materialistic, right? There's nothing spiritual there. Really? Because of the fridge and because of your washing machine and all that things that we take for granted, we have more time. More time to pursue intellectual endeavors, more time to engage with culture. The industrial society has literally added life to our life. The industrial society has given us time, and time is all we have. The industrial society has democratized science. There were scientists throughout history. But now, for the first time, the products of science get to us through technology. Now, suddenly, the scientist, his achievement is relevant to my life. It can literally save my life. So, if we are decent human beings, we should appreciate the industrial society. But not only appreciate, we also need to understand it. Because only if we understand it, we can then defend it. Understanding the industrial society is our way of saying thank you to all the things that we have. So what made an industrial society possible? What is the basis of an industrial society? The obvious first level is an industrial society equals machines, technology, means of production. But actually it's more than that. The basis of an industrial society is first and foremost ideas and values. And because these ideas at some point were adopted by many people, this is why we had an industrial society. And because these ideas were most prominent and enthusiastically adopted in the West, this is why the industrial society is synonymous with the Western civilization. So what type of ideas gave us an industrial society? Well, first of all, the idea that this world is for us to shape and to enjoy. That this world is not a vale of tears. This world is our fiefdom. We can reshape it. We can imagine it in a different way, and we can reshape it. And it's not a sin, but it's something actually good. To reshape the world, of course, first we need to understand it. So the second very important idea, in order to have an industrial society, is the idea that we can know the world. We can picture out that there are relations of causality, that we can understand how things work, and therefore we can change it. If the industrial society actually had a flag, if it ever had a coat of arms, it would be the immortal lines of Francis Bacon. Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. This is the industrial society, right? We command nature. But how do we do it? By obeying it, by understanding it. And this is why the industrial society is a society that has reverence for reason, for knowledge, for science. Remember, in the Dark Ages, curiosity was considered a sin. The curious person was someone who was considered a public enemy. Whereas in the industrial society, the Renaissance man, the human being who is curious, who wants to learn more, is the best example, and he is the best representative of the industrial society. So the industrial society, by its very nature, needs to have reverence for truth, for reality. I mean, try making a microchip, or try pouring molten metal, not going by your mind, but going by feelings or by instinct. You'll soon find out, and it won't be nice. Another idea that was important for the rise of an industrial society is the idea that every human being has value, and their lives is an end in itself. Which means that another condition for an industrial society is the idea of freedom. Another very new idea, very radical idea. And turns out, a Western idea, an idea that developed in the West. And again, this is why the industrial society can be found in the West. So the industrial society, implicitly, unfortunately, not explicitly, but implicitly, recognizes that freedom is an existential necessity. In what way? Well, to understand the world, we need to be, first of all, free to think, free to discover, free to wonder, but also free to communicate our thoughts. There is no industrial society without free speech. There is no industrial society without the freedom, without intellectual freedom. But intellectual freedom is not enough for an industrial society. Because we are not ghosts, we also have a body, we also have a material existence. And therefore, we need to be free not only to think, but also to act, to create, to build, to produce, but also to cooperate with others, to come together, and to trade, to become better together. Therefore, it has to be said, there cannot be an industrial society without also economic freedom. And people will say, well, what about China? We can discuss this. We can discuss this in the Q&A. And to the extent, because the industrial society recognizes these fundamental elements of what it means to be human, to be curious, to go by reason, and to be free, this is why the man or the woman of the industrial society is peak humanity. It's humanity at its best. Because it's the most complete human being, the human being who thinks and the human being who acts. And in the same way that we appreciate the heroes of the intellect, the heroes that brought us the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, in the same way we appreciate Newton, John Locke, or Adam Smith, in the same way we should also appreciate the builders. We should appreciate this very misunderstood figure, which is the industrialist. We should appreciate a bit more someone like Carnegie. His cheap steel built the industrial cities as we know it. We should appreciate a bit more someone like Rockefeller. Rockefeller literally, with his cheap oil, added hours to our day. It made us more productive, or it gave us more hours to pursue intellectual endeavors. He literally illuminated our houses. We should appreciate more someone like Henry Ford. Think about it. How many of the best, most memorable moments of your life has to do with a private car? With whatever you do in a private car, right? There's someone behind it. Initially, there was some mind behind it, the fact that this is available to all of us. And of course, we should appreciate also someone like Steve Jobs. The reason I'm in this room has to do with a lecture I listened by Frank in 2012 from my iPod. So this is the industrial society, and this is what it has done for us. Now, what is the status of the industrial society today? How does it fare? How is it doing? Well, we still live in an industrial society, but this is despite of the culture out there, not because of the culture out there. The industrial civilization today, the industrial society, is like a train which is still going on, but it is going on purely on momentum. There is no one throwing coal to the machine of the train. Actually, it's worse. There are many, many people who throw wedges to the train, and soon it's going to go out of line. And why is that? Well, it's because the intellectual basis of the industrial society is eroded. Let's think again about this Francis Bacon quote, "Nature to be commanded must be obeyed." How do we see these things today? Nature to be commanded. Are we comfortable with this idea? Unfortunately not. Actually, it's the exact opposite. We consider human impact on nature as something bad. We consider that the ideal is a pristine nature, basically a nature without human beings, a nature where our impact is as little as possible. Well, that's not how you have an industrial society. Or how about the idea that we can know the world, that the world, we can understand it, that we can make sense? Well, today we don't even know if we have free will. Today we're not even sure if there is such a thing as a reality, or if there is such a thing as reason. Maybe there's white reason, black reason, male reason, female reason. You can't have an industrial society on that. On the long term, it's either or. It's either we're going to have the ideas and the values that are compatible with an industrial society, or we're not going to have an industrial society. And to finish, the blurb mentions a new industrial revolution. So why don't we have a new industrial revolution? And the sad truth is because there's not much demand for it. Most people don't consider it as something good. And this makes us understand also what is the terrain, the field where we will fight for a new industrial revolution. And initially, it's not going to be the factory. It's not going to be the lab. It's not going to be fighting this regulation or that regulation. First of all, in order to have a new industrial revolution, the terrain to fight is the battle of ideas. For example, how are we going to view human beings? Are we going to view them as capable, as efficacious? In this case, we will trust them with freedom. In this case, they will keep creating, they will keep building. But if we see human beings as wretched, as doomed, as basket cases, then we don't need freedom. Then we need to do damage control. We need to limit them. We need to control them. We need to make sure they have as little impact as possible. Another important question on whether we can sustain an industrial society. Who are we going to look up to? Who are we going to listen to? Who are going to be our moral paragons? Is it going to be someone, for example, like Ayn Rand, who celebrates industry, not just something that brings the results and as something which is practical, but something good, that being industrious is moral, it's heroic? Or is our moral paragon going to be someone like Greta Thunberg, who actually sides with every single ideology which is destructive for human flourishing? Someone who sides with environmentalism, someone who sides with apologism for jihadism. And yet we see them in every forum. He's invited in parliaments. He's being applauded. And who are going to be our heroes? Who are going to be our role models? Is it going to be creators, producers, builders, either literal builders or actors or people who create something beautiful? Or is it going to be these dead-eyed zombies that we see in universities and these people who throw like paint to art? And yet they are celebrated as the idealists, right? So at the end of the day, if we want to have an industrial society, we have to fight for it. And not just because, again, it will bring us more stuff, though more stuff is good. We need to fight for it because the industrial society is the only humane society. Humane with a literal term of the word. The only society which is welcome to the way human beings should live. Thinking, creating, and changing the world out there. Because at the end of the day, this is what an industrial civilization is. It is the civilization that makes the earth a better place. Thank you very much.